Hello and welcome all of you out there, and I'm back after a short break. I had some dental work going on, but I won't get into it. Let's just get into what's the most enjoyable Ark teams out there, because why not? In at number 10, I simply had to put the Vonaur. I really do love this as an Ark creature, and sort of just as a general concept. It really does work well with its spine attack abilities, just being one of the most enjoyable in my opinion. And it's sort of sad that Wildcard never really revisited this creature and sort of added something similar to it, but it also is technically a good thing too. It stands by its own, and with the Vonaurs on Genesis Part 2, you've got some even better ones out there if you wish to have the upgraded version, but both still offer a lot of versatility in the combat scene. Of course, you wouldn't use them that close to a theory, but you know, it's just for proof of concept in the B-roll. And their stamina also goes on for absolutely ages. You're going to have no problems with stamina drain on a creature like this. They truly are one of the most enjoyable in my opinion. Next up, I've decided to put the Roggatha, and although not a big favourite of mine, just for other reasons, which I won't get into today because I still really like the creature and it's not really valid in my opinion, but my brain is my brain. This creature just can do an incredible amount, and that ability to pick up just such large creatures still always is fascinating and enjoyable to me. Like picking up Rexes and Paraceratheriums and things like that, that just seems really insane to me, and it excites me every time I see one of these things do that, or just generally when I do it, because you always think of carrying creatures like that in a cryopod or soul traps, because who really uses cryopods unless you're playing on official or on console? Just use soul traps. They're just far better. They are a little bit rare sometimes, I find, to actually tame, and the tame method is pretty enjoyable too, as long as you get it right. It's exactly the same as the Reaper tame method, such as just impregnates a dino instead of your own self, and you're also going to need a bunch of resources which will appear on screen at some point rather than the XP. So the tame method, in my opinion, isn't quite as enjoyable as the Reaper, but that creature's later on the list, and I think we'll talk about this thing a little bit later, but still a very enjoyable creature to ride around on, deal damage with, and pick up insanely large creatures with. Next up, I've decided to put the Gasbags on the list, as the idea of the Gasbags still just really excites me as an Ark player, and it's sort of comedically funny in the way it moves. It's just basically passing gas as it moves through the sky, because it doesn't actually fly in the sense of using its wings. It simply uses its air, which it fills up through its mouth. So you know, it's a funny concept from Wildcard, and I really enjoy it. And once you get round controlling one, it can be a very fun experience to have around friends. And even if you're not great at flying one like I was in the B-roll, I should really update this at some point, you can still have a heck of a time as well, as long as you don't end up losing everything and getting things killed, because there obviously is a probability to some extent, which, you know, you always got to be careful out there. Ark is Ark at the end of the day, and it will throw you under the bus quite a lot. This is a really great traveller of heavy things, though. It has a great amount of weight and it flies at quite a decent speed. Doesn't even need a saddle. The saddle's only there if you want to bring a mate along with you, which is why I said it's quite good if you've got a friend too. Just really adds to the enjoyable level of this creature, but also just playing games with your friends is generally more enjoyable than just playing it by yourself. In at number 7, we've got the Bionics, and I simply have to put this creature here, at least in my opinion, because of the huge experience that I've had with a creature like this. It really does excite me as an Ark tame. It is such an easy one, and yet so useful and versatile to the general Ark player. A lot can be done with a Bionics that really can't be done with other creatures, at least within the range of when you're going to be taming this thing. It's saddled dirt cheap as well. It is an insanely great caving mount, capable of fitting into any sort of cave with absolute ease, apart from the artifacts of the Skylords, but basically a dung beetle's not even going to fit in that either. You've got to crouch through bits of that. There's not really a point of bringing creatures into that cave. But when you do bring this into any sort of cave, you're going to demolish all creatures that you can find in the area. You'll have absolutely no issues with that whatsoever. You're going to tower through tons and tons of creatures and just have no issues whatsoever, health wise and damage wise, because they really do pack. They're great at swimming as well. With their spin attack, they can stun creatures like the size of Megalodon. They truly are fantastic tames, really enjoyable to ride on, and just generally really enjoyable creatures. Coming up next, we have got the Desmodus, And for me, is there really anything more fun than just a blood bag farm that can also do 30% of your tames with a click of a button? It is just such an enjoyable creature to have around. The Sanguine Elixir, again, 30% of your tame is done like that with a click of a button, and their blood bag farms. And for a creature later on the list, that is going to be an extremely useful thing for me. Might not be quite for you, but definitely for me. But even if you're thinking of taming more Desmoduses, it's still going to be useful to you. They have the glide ability as well, and they are rapidly fast flies. You're never going to be let down by the speed of these things, at least I'm not in any sense. And they can also grapple onto walls, vertical surfaces, or ceilings, like a Tapijara, which is another quite nice creature, although I think I'm not really too fond on it. The Desmodus is definitely a far better creature in my eye. Spawns on Fjorda, really isn't too difficult to tame. Your first one is obviously going to be the hardest, but then you've got a blood bag farm, so it really isn't going to be too difficult for all the others. Just great flyers, great use for PvP, great use for PvE. And at number 5, we have got the Astrodelphus, and I'm also going to put the Tropignatus here as sort of a side note, but I really love both of these creatures as they are just such fast flies. They are so rapid, like genuinely you can get a lot done with the speed of these things. You can traverse maps with absolute ease. You should have no issues whatsoever, especially in just generally getting from A to B really quickly. Even in the damage department too, they excel with all of their lasers or just bomb firing apparatus. And although maybe there's a little bit more gauge on how fast you're going on the Tropignatus, in my opinion the Astrodelphus is just more of the smoother flyer. Although its saddle is unlocked a little bit later on, and arguably its tame method's harder, although I've always found it a bit easier in my opinion, because Element is found everywhere on Gen 2, and if you just do it right and take precautions for void roams in the area, you really should have no issues, even getting one of these things quite early on. In the early days of the channel, I also made a guide to taming one of these things. It's an absolutely terrible video, but if you want to check it out, then you can add to about the 20 views that it's got at the moment. It came out it came out over a year ago now. Actually, maybe don't look up, that's an embarrassing time in my channel. In number 4, we have got the Reaper, and this it's just one of those creatures where it's like, can anything really get better than a Xenomorph alien? Obviously, apart from the creature which are in the 1, 2, and 3 spots, at least for me. Yeah, this thing really is up there when it comes into enjoyable Ark tames. It is such a great marathon to tame one of these things with its, some may say, laboriously long method, and also quite difficult one too, but I find it really isn't too bad once you get into it. And if it all goes well for you, which if you prepare enough it should, unless Ark's just being Ark and it absolutely ruins everything for you, then it should be a reasonably enjoyable experience. Simply trap it and get its health below 1000, that being a Reaper Queen of course, and then you need to let it impregnate you, get loads of XP, and then once your Reaper baby is born, try and claim that thing. Some Reaper pheromones will help if that baby's still trying to kill you, because it probably will, to be honest. They're not strictly necessary, at least I'm pretty sure, so I don't think you have to feed them to it early on, but I would keep them there for safe measure. They're not quite the hardest things to get, but it will take a little bit of elbow grease. But then you got yourself a cool Reaper, and it's such a great arc of progression. I love taming these things every single time on AB. Yes, they can be easily obtained on Gen 2, but I don't really see the fun in that because it's really just not difficult in my opinion, and I love the progression. In at number 3, we have got the Mwing, and this is so enjoyable to me as, come on, look at firstly just how good this thing's model is. I love the design of this creature. It's sort of like a flying sky platypus, and it's really captured the hearts of many Ark players ever since its release. But also why it's just so enjoyable is that it's just so fast. It's like honestly insane. This thing travels at such a pace, basically nothing can keep up to it unless it's had insane movement speed levels put into it, which isn't possible on basically all these servers out there because little have fly speed leveling. I'm also pro fly speed leveling, by the way, if you're wondering. I think Ark should really bring it back. I guess, yeah, it was a little bit game breaking, but maybe set a limit on it for those official servers, like 135% or 150% or something like that, because it really does add a nice dynamic. Yeah, 1000 movement speed Mavings would be absolutely insane, and I've tested them out on some single player servers and they are so fun to ride on when they're that speed, but also a little bit not, because you just get stuck in everything. That's a portable feeding trough, so it is an enjoyable thing for breeders. they're pretty decent swimmers too, and they can gather berries, but the main reason why they're here is just the Mwings are so good with their speed. It's honestly insane. In number 2, I've decided to put the Bloodstalker, as this is my favourite all-time, just basically general travelling mount out there. While I love the Mwing and it's got loads of great speed on it, for just generally all travel combined, that including underwater travel especially, because I do actually spend quite a lot of time down there. I don't know why I've been doing that as of late, but I'm just really enjoying it, I guess. Just for general travel on the surface as well, they work so effectively, and they are my favourite travel mount at the moment. Not only can you see all the aggros of the creatures, but they are fast in literally any environment, underwater and on land. Maybe not in lava, but I don't think any creature is, apart from the Magmasaur, but that's not on the list because it really isn't one of my favourites out there, at least just generally in my opinion. But I do find these things to be very quick and agile in basically every environment that you're going to face. Again, the underwater environment travel of this creature is just insane, and that is one of the main reasons why I'm putting it here. As yes, a Basilow is immune to all the electric eels and jellyfish, but you can easily skip away from them with a creature like this, and you can see if that aggroed onto you well before they even reach you, which is why these things are just amazing. There's just so much peace of mind put into this creature, and they've really seemingly been so well designed for all of these environments, and I just love them dearly, especially with the Desmodus being bloodback farms. I can tame as many of these things really as I want, but usually I'll just settle for one high level, maybe get another one, and then I've got a breeding pair, and then I'll breed them together and then just take the baby of that, ride it around, and then if it dies I'll just breed those 2 Bloodstalkers together again, and boom, I've got another Bloodstalker. But I'll usually keep a couple of babies spare, because you should always keep some spare of your favourite dinos. And coming in at number 1, we've got the Deinonychus. I really can't find anything that is more enjoyable just as a general creature to me like the Deinonychus. It is such a good one for any kind of boss fight. It just deals a heck of a lot of damage really, and with the bleed ability being inflicted on bosses as well, it is an all gore out fight, and I really do like these creatures for that. It adds just a sort of comicness to these creatures, and that's something which I really enjoy. Just there's blood spewing absolutely everywhere on this Bronto, and soon enough it is very much dead. With the pack buff too, you are buffed like absolute hell, and you've got tons of these things going after you as well, obviously along with you as sort of your pack mates, to help those boss fights go by as quickly as possible. Even for longer ones like the Master Controller, I find they still work well. Yes, a couple of health mutations are probably required, but it's not the hardest thing in the world to get those done, at least from my experience. Yes, on official everything it's still going to be a pain, but I'm working with 2.5x rates here with 5x on breeding, because I don't like to wait quite that long. Because a Giga taking a week on official is something which I really don't want. That's raising time, by the way. They can also scale any kind of wall or vertical surface with absolute ease. The climbing and the sort of parkour that these creatures offer is one which is sort of highly sought after. The Thyla does it very well too, but the Deinonychus is just a better creature overall. The only thing it lacks is that underwater travel, but realistically I'm not going to be using it for that. I'm just using it for everything else. The top 10 classic Ark tames. In at number 10 we have got the Raptor, and it is fair to say that a ton of these were tamed and used in those early days of Ark, and personally myself, I did use quite a lot of them as well. On top of this, I did go through a fair few of them, and many people did as well. And when new players do kind of maybe think back on what Ark was like previously, they're probably going to think of things like Raptors and Rexes and Spinos and Carnos and Allos and things like that. By the way, the Allo is not appearing on this list, as far as I'm concerned, it is a later creature, although I should probably check that, but I will inform you further on in the video, because actually I'm not too sure on the chronology, and actually just checking, the Allosaurus was not around in 2015. The Alpha Carno, the Alpha Raptor, the Alpha Rex, the Angler, the Anki, the Aranio and the Argy were the only creatures beginning with A out in 2015. The fun facts we all know. Either way, this creature was extremely useful back in the day and got tons of use. Obviously, people didn't really care too much about its low weight and its somewhat slower speed than what some people would expect from these days of Ark. People didn't really seem to care as much about things like that. They were just so excited to get their hands on creatures At least that was kind of my experience of it back then, and yeah, it really did do the job for me, and I got a lot of great use out of this creature, and it really is one of those great ones. And if you do have the time, still to this day, I would definitely recommend you get a Raptor, as they can be quite useful in the early game stages, as you have yourself a nice neat carnivore to use around the map. Next up, we have got the Beelzebufo, and this creature is here just because when it released, which I'm actually surprised to say is 2015. I had a look and I did some research on it because I thought this was more of a 2016 creature, but no, it was out in 2015. Kind of does make sense when I actually think back with all the chronology, and this creature really was heavily useful. Didn't use it for any kind of cement-based gathering. Not even sure if it could do that back in the days. Comment that down below, because I'm not too sure of its abilities and if it had a TLC at any point, but it was definitely widely used just for a really good travel mount. I used it a lot for underwater exploration back then, and you kind of put the Megalodon here as well on this list. It isn't appearing on the list, but I'm going to give it a brief mention, as the Megalodon was definitely a really nice classic Ark tame, which I used quite heavily, but I did use this thing a lot, and in some ways it's more memorable because its release was quite striking. Like, I remember when this thing came out, I just really wanted to tame one, and I really enjoyed using it. I liked it's kind of like sort of playing a Mario game. That's how I looked at it. You're playing a Mario game, but it's Ark, because these things can jump around, jump like crazy, and do all those things. And the Procoptodon might have been out at this point, and you had that, but I just felt so much more free with this creature. Coming up next, we have got the Carnotaurus, and this creature is definitely a favourite of mine and has to be in the classic Ark tames list. It was here from the beginning. Did, I think, have some sort of a model change at some point, and even back then, actually, I think the models looked really cool, and compared to like the RG and the old Rex model, it looked significantly less outdated, at least in my mind. Either way, pretty confident they have had a model update since then. Obviously, texture updates and things like that have happened throughout Ark's game just being developed, as it progressed from being a 2015 looking game to maybe more of a 2018, 2019 looking game in its kind of late stages, I would say, because it doesn't look like most of the games that you would get in 2015, especially for that kind of survival game. And also, if you didn't know already, this is the 2023 version of Ark, which is ASA for this B-roll here. You'll see it interchanging between the two types of game. So the Beelzebufo would have been the original Ark, and the Raptor and the Carno are in ASA. If you couldn't tell already, you could probably tell, because the graphics have significantly changed, haven't they? For the better, you could say, although the ghosting and the shadows like not really working properly are maybe not the best of things, but still, you know, it is overall a better looking game, and you know, it kind of makes you think back of those classic times. We are doing a classic tames list after all. Also, if you were wondering, the Carno has had a TLC since release, so now it's even better than before, and it is ridiculously easy to tame on ASA. If you are actually playing ASA, there's pretty dead at the moment for the general player space, so you know, that's what that's like. But either way, Carno, still remember it so clearly to this day. Used it so much just as a general carnivore, even before I got that saddle, because obviously doing the levels was actually quite difficult back in the days. To spend quite a lot of time, really is a classic. Next up, we have got the Quetzal, and this creature is here because actually, surprisingly, when it released in 2015, thought it was more of a 2016 creature, but again, there's another creature on this list which is later on, which I also thought was a 2016 creature, but no, it is still a 2015 creature. It just came out later in the year, of course, and when looking at creatures like this, it really did change the Ark space. Like, the amount of use that you got out of this creature, especially with that platform saddle, was insane. It was just so cool to fly these things around, and it was, again, a new perspective on the game. You could build the base on the back of a flyer, and because flyer speed leveling hadn't been nerfed at that time, you could get these things traveling at insane speeds, and it was so fun to go around the map with your mates and just absolutely dominate metal farming, because that's what I use this for. Wasn't really a PvP player. If you were thinking that I was going to say dominate the map, didn't really use them for that, but metal farming was so easy with these things, and just general transportation of goods was so easy, and it was nice to have a nice base and sometimes a taming trap on the back of one of these things. The Dodo is here next, and could I really make a top 10 classic Ark Tames video without actually including the Dodo on the list? Come on, it is the Dodo after all. Probably one of the first creatures, if not the first creature you're going to see in Ark, and everyone when they started in 2015 tamed yourself a Dodo at some point. They were so easy. Still took 15 minutes to tame because, yes, taming took absolutely ages. At least mine felt like 15 minutes to tame. Probably might have been 5, could have been 10. Either way, you punch these things out and you feed them some berries. I might have not even been feeding these things medjos. Maybe that's why it just took so long. And yes, you have yourself a cute Dodo friend, and the Dodos are definitely a classic Ark Tame, and it could not be a classic Ark Tames list without including these things here. They really do add something to Ark, even though maybe not the most widely used creature, they have to be on this list. In at number 5, we have got the Pteranodon, and this creature is here just because it was so useful to get up into the air that early on in the game, and it really felt like something so special to get up and fly in the air. It was like the biggest achievement in the Ark game. I probably should have put this thing a little bit higher than the number 5 spots, not in the number 1 spot. We're not that close to the end of the list yet. We're halfway in, guys. Either way, these creatures, they just made such a mark on your Ark progress, and you could just speed up everything so much with a Pteranodon. You're like, oh yeah, this is all fine now because I have a Pteranodon. And it was such a pain once you lost it somewhere because you died and you just spent ages going back to get it. Why, you always have a spare Pteranodon at home, and then you can have the other one to follow you once you're heading back, obviously with a spare saddle on it. Otherwise, they are pretty much useless as creatures. Like, you need the saddle to really use this creature effectively. It's not like the Carno or, you know, in some cases like Rexes and Gigas and things like that, where you can have them following you around. No, you really do need the saddle to get the use out of this creature. And actually getting that chitin or keratin, whatever you preferred. I got loads of keratin for the saddle back in the day, but now thinking about it, I should have just got loads of chitin, as killing all of those insects is so much easier than going around and killing loads of carb enemies. Another pretty classic creature in my eyes, although not on the list, but you know, again, I'll give it a brief mention here. And the Pteranodon was so easy, so simple to tame, and just made your progress and just your general Ark life so much better that it has to be included on this list, and people still use it tons to this day, and it really is uncompetable in the level range that you are when you're taming one of these things. Next up on the list, we have got the Tiny Tim, and obviously the Tiny Tim has to be on the list. Again, surprised that Tiny Tim came out in 2015. I thought it was 2016 as well, but it kind of just makes sense that the birth of Tiny Tim did happen in 2015. Originally called the Giganotosaurus, soon after named the Tiny Tim, of course, by Ibalistic Squid and Ashdub, if you didn't know the reference already. And the Tiny Tim was capable of dealing just so much damage. You felt on top of the world, and you could decimate any single creature, especially things like Spinos and Rexes. They felt like small little puny critters to the Tiny Tim. You felt like an absolute demolition king, being able to just destroy everything in your path, that being trees, that being creatures, even sometimes the oceans, which you might not expect out of these creatures, considering you might not think they're the best swimmers. They're not really, but they can go through rivers like it's nothing, because most of the time their feet are touching the bottom, and like you can see there, it just crosses that like it's nothing. It essentially just walks along all of it, and they're just so OP, so big, and they really did make such a nice effort to contributing to the evolution of Ark, and they just so successful as a creature. I really did have to put them in on the list. In at number 3, we have got the Rex, and this creature is here just because Ark probably wouldn't be Ark without the Rex. And when thinking of dinosaurs in general, you often do think of creatures like this. Obviously, the Rex is probably like one of the most popular dinosaurs, well-known dinosaurs to date in the world. Like, everyone just knows what this creature is, and everyone will use this creature really in their Ark progress. It is such a great boss creature, and when the Broodmother was a thing, I'm pretty sure it was out at roughly release, but it might have not been. I think it came a little bit afterwards. Definitely still a 2015 thing. You'd gather up those Rexes and then you'd go and fight the Broodmother. You could use a wealth of other creatures as well. I did use things like Carnos and Spinos as well. really were the goats of the boss defeating world back then. You wouldn't really have any Daedons or UTs, but still you would really just pack a punch against those bosses. And also, actually just for general use around the map, I did use the Rex quite a lot in those early days. I don't really do it anymore as there are some better options out there, but back then the Rex was just one of those goats that you'd use everywhere for just getting any kind of damage done. You just bring the Rexes along with you, even if you didn't have the saddles for them, if you weren't obviously a high enough level, or if you just didn't have the resources to craft the saddle. Probably more or less the first one, because the Rexes, in all fairness, weren't actually too difficult to tame. Yes, the time commitment to taming one was quite large, but once you had the tranks, and if you like trapped them in a cliff or something like that, or you just like stood on top of a cliff really and then just shot it from down below, it was a pretty easy secured tame with no issues whatsoever, as long as there wasn't too many hostile things in the area. In at number 2, we have got the RG, and not only is this thing nostalgic for its old model, but just also its tremendous use back in the day, and the upgrade of getting an RG over the Pteranodon was insane, especially considering you could level up that speed and get it even faster than something like a Pteranodon with not too much effort. And then from that you'd have much better weight and much better stamina, of course, and you could just take these things around the map with absolute ease, and you could get loads of stuff on them with no risk of being encumbered. They could also pick up a wider range of creatures too, and if you paired it with an Anki or a Dodic, then you'd really net yourself with some great harvesting power, and you could just put loads of these resources onto the RG, and it was such a great time. Not sure if they did have weight reduction back in the day, or a smithy as a saddle, or even that regen buff. They might have received quite a huge amount of TLC when obviously they got the model update and all of that. But actually, I do want you to comment that down below, because strangely, for a creature that I use so much and that I used so much in those very early days of Ark, I don't really know what ability it strictly had back then, and I do want to know for sure. It did not carry creatures in its mouth as an extra thing, but obviously it can do that now if you want to carry your pet Dodo around on your adventures and really let it see all the sights that the world has to offer in Ark. And in ASA you can do it again, but with some better graphics and some lower FPS. As always, Ark performance descended. And finally, in number 1, we have got the Spino, and this creature for me really just did invoke a lot of incitement in me, and as a general creature I felt it to be bigger and more powerful than the Rex, and with its added mobility as well, I thought it was just fabulous, and with that water mobility as well, really truly great creature. Back in the days it did not have the hydration buff, at least I'm pretty sure it didn't, and it didn't have the ability to go up on its hind legs, and I'm not sure if it had oxygen then and doesn't have oxygen now, or didn't have oxygen then and now has oxygen. It's one of those combinations. It has received quite a little bit of change since its release, obviously with an updated model as well. At least I'm pretty confident that there was an updated Spino model. Most of the models did actually really get updated in Ark as they went through the change of updating all the UI, but just this was like the go-to creature for me. I wanted a Spino, and when I tamed one, I was definitely not disappointed, and I vastly prefer these things to the Rexes in like every way. And I would use these things for doing bosses, I would use these things for everything I would use a Rex for, and it kind of made the Rex reasonably redundant for me, as I didn't really think too much about, oh, how much like health does it really have relating to how much damage, and how balanced of a creature it is to make it really good at dealing with all of those bosses. I didn't think of things like that. I was just like, whatever does more damage, and the Spino tended to do more damage, at least from the ones that I tamed back in the day, and I vastly preferred its underwater travel and just general mobility. I felt it to be a much more widely useful creature, and that is why I simply had to put it on this list. It just is such a successful creature for me, and in my opinion it is the most classic Ark tame out there. Obviously for you it may be different, but for me this is just the absolute goat of classic Ark tames, and it has no competition for me whatsoever, just none at all. And give it up for our patrons Ekaterina Puchkova and Karina Thorne, Dominic Macy Juski, sorry about that name, and everyone else that's on this list. All the people I've mentioned are paid members, and if you feel like that's something you want a shout out at the end of the video, go join the Patreon or become a paid YouTube member.